Sometimes, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a chapter, unsure if we should turn the page, or linger a little longer in the comfort of what we know. Life isn't just a story, it's an endless series of choices. Some small, others that shake us to our core. This is a story about one such choice. It begins in the quiet of a late autumn evening, as the last leaves of the year drift down in a peaceful dance. Alex, a man in his late 40s, sits in a dimly lit study, his fingers brushing over the well-worn pages of a journal. The scent of old paper and ink fills the air, and the faint crackle of a fire does little to mask the heaviness in his heart. Alex had spent his entire life in the shadow of others' expectations. He had been a husband, a father, a son. He had worked hard, climbed corporate ladders, and sacrificed his personal desires for the sake of what he believed was right. He had lived a life full of accomplishments, yet somehow empty. Now, he found himself standing at the edge of change. His children were grown. His marriage had faded into a distant memory, and his career, once a source of pride, now felt like a cage. But more than anything, Alex felt the weight of the one thing he had never allowed himself to consider: his own happiness. He had spent years living for everyone else. But at what cost? The journal in his hands belonged to his father. It was a collection of thoughts, notes, and memories that Alex had inherited after his father's passing. His father had always been a man of few words, but the journal told a different story, one of regrets, unspoken dreams, and a life lived by default rather than by design. As Alex flipped through the pages, he came across a note his father had written years ago. "The hardest part of life isn't living it. It's living it truthfully. The truth will never be kind, but it will always be honest." Those words lingered in his mind, heavy yet undeniable. What if his father had been right? What if, like him, Alex had spent his entire life avoiding the truth, sacrificing his own desires for the sake of others? The rain outside grew heavier. The sound of droplets against the window seemed to mirror the turmoil inside him. He sat there for a long time, staring at the journal. His father's words echoed in his mind. Alex realized that the life he had lived was not the one he had chosen. It had been a life of necessity, a life of doing what was expected. But now, in the quiet of his study, he had to ask himself, what would happen if I chose differently? As the storm raged outside, Alex stood and walked to the window. The night was dark, save for the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the sky. It felt like the world was holding its breath. And in that moment, so was Alex. He had spent years running from his true self. But now, the truth was staring him in the face. It wasn't the world that needed changing. It was him. The last chapter of his life hadn't been written yet, and he had the power to write it himself. In the weeks that followed, Alex made changes, small ones at first. He began to prioritize his own happiness, reconnected with old passions, reached out to old friends, and for the first time in years, he felt alive again. But the most important change was this: he learned to forgive himself. He had spent so much of his life carrying the weight of others' expectations. But now he understood that the only approval he needed was his own. And so, Alex started the final chapter of his life. A chapter that, for the first time, was truly his own. It wasn't perfect. And it wasn't easy. But it was real. And sometimes, that's all we really need. So, what about you? What chapter are you on? And what would it take for you to finally write the next one? On your own terms. Every story has two sides, Alex's and yours. Which one do you see yourself in? If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, so you never miss our next story.